Welcome to Plastic Model Mojo, a podcast dedicated to scale modeling, as well as the news and events around the hobby, where we hope to be informative and entertaining and help you keep your modeling mojo alive. Well, Dave and I sure hope you're not too superstitious. We have managed to get ourselves up to episode 13. But before we get into our thing, I want to encourage everyone listening to make sure they check out the latest from Stuart and Anthony at Scale Model Podcast, and likewise from Dave, Julian, and Ian at On the Bench. While we've made a habit of cross-promoting each other, I wanted to encourage the latest episode from both of these other shows in particular, because they both had quite interesting interviews that I'm sure you will all enjoy. So with that said, let's get on to episode 13 of Plastic Model Mojo. Well, Dave, I think spring's finally going to stick now.
I think it is, and that hasn't been great for my modeling these last 2 weekends. How about you?
No, me either. I mean, spending a lot more time outside and people wanting to go places that we can actually go to. We went up to the lake, Cave Run Lake Saturday for a little while.
It's a nice place.
Yeah, Saturday afternoon was busy, and then Sunday I was working outside, and just a day got away from me.
Yeah, I have not gotten a ton of modeling done the last 2 weekends, simply because of the fact that now that the weather's good, I had some high hopes having a holiday weekend, and then this past weekend following it. But no, it's all yard work and getting the deck area and the pool all ready and all of that stuff. So pretty exhausting. So you taking the paint out with some nice modeling fluid?
Yeah, it's a beer night. I'm drinking a brown ale from Rockhouse Brewery here in Lexington.
Oh,
for a brown, it's kind of on the darker end of that spectrum. I think it's got a nice roasted finish to it. It's not as heavy as maybe some porters are, but it's good. It's a nice smooth beer.
It is a beer night, as a matter of fact. After a couple of episodes of Kentucky's favorite modeling fluid, I switched it up a little bit, and this is you're kind of to blame for this. I'm having New Belgium's Voodoo Ranger Imperial IPA. It's an IPA, and I am not an IPA fan, but once I've started drinking that Gumball Head that you got me hooked on, I've come to appreciate the IPAs a little more. And this one, it's not bad. It's very light as far as the IPA goes. Now, it's an Imperial ale, so it's about 9% alcohol, which doesn't hurt. But it's a really nice, I wouldn't exactly call it light drink, but it goes down very easy. There's no particular taste other than you get the hops at the end, but not bad. So I've kind of been enjoying this. This has been my beer of choice, along with Gumball Head, for the last couple of weeks.
Well, you can't blame everything on me this episode. You did last time.
Well, yeah, I can. I mean, I'm a lawyer. It's kind of what I do.
I guess that's true.
Yeah, I'll try and take it easy on you, although you do have some blame coming up later in the episode.
All right. Well, I'll take the heat, I guess.
All right.
Well, we got a little listener mail again. I tell you, when we ask people for input, we sure get it. So that's a good thing.
Yeah.
So who we got? We have Mr. Damien Rigby from Strathwin, Australia, down near Melbourne. Hopefully I said that right. Modeling fluid of choice tonight is good old JD number 7. That would be Jack Daniels, I assume.
Yep.
That's number 7's their signature black label. I'm working my way through the earlier episodes, and number 3 and number 4 kept me company at the bench tonight while I worked on an engine to a 1/25th scale 55 Chevy Pro Sportsman. No, he sent some pictures. It's a like a drag conversion, funny car, maybe
Gotcha.
not that. It's a
Like a gasser.
yeah, hot rod,
Yeah,
something like that. Let's see. And then he goes on to mention, I hope you pick up some SMS paints from USA Gundam Store. The owner of SMS Paints or SMS Company, Scale Model Supply, is a friend of mine, and the paints are excellent. Now that's the paint line that sponsors On the Bench.
it is. It is, and frankly, I've been wanting to at least give those a test. Um, and I know they've got a U.S. distributor at the USA Gundam store. So
Well, when I got this, I did go out and look at the range, to kind of see what the color selection was. It looked pretty good. So yeah, maybe I'll do the same.
yeah, maybe we'll do a combined order.
Okay, we could do that.
Save a little on postage.
That's right. We got another response from Preston Culp. Now, Preston was out in Kansas, if you remember from a few episodes back, because we recommended him to a club out there, but he hasn't got there yet. I've been listening to your podcast, and it gets better with every episode. Well, that's good to
Thank you.
hear. Thank you. Since my original email, I joined the IPMS and was looking forward to trying out the Chisholm Trail Modeling Club based on your recommendation. Then came the COVID-19 and the stay-at-home orders. My job is considered critical since it's national defense and aerospace. But I was able to work from home part-time with nowhere to go. I got spend a little more time at the bench. I think we all got to do that for a while. And he sent some pictures, so I'm working. I've actually started working on the gallery. I was trying to collect all these in a folder on my PC so I can get them all into the gallery at one shot.
Well, I won't
And
blame you for not having them up yet.
okay, thank you. Says his lovely wife of 42 years has given him the den and basement for his modeling and library. So he sounds like you. He's got a library.
Good woman. Good woman.
Currently, I'm using our kitchen table, our old kitchen table, and part of his stash is stored along the back side of the table. He sent a picture of that as well. He's got a tip in here for storing magazines, which I'm gonna skip to that. He takes filing cabinet hang file folders and cuts the metal bar or spanner across off the top of each side.
Yep.
And that gives him two rails he can hang two magazines. He drops the center of the magazine over that bar and plops them in the file cabinet.
I have seen that done, and that is an ingenious way to store them. I kind of store them in a similar fashion. I use these 3-hole punched magazine holders that are simply a strip of plastic with the 3 holes for a binder and then a slot in it, and you do the same thing. You open the magazine up to the middle, you slide it into the center, and then you can organize them in binders. But it's the same general idea.
Well, and I hope he gets to visit the Chisholm Trail IPMS chapter, but sounds like they're probably in the same boat we're in right now with our club, and just kind of taking a wait and see attitude when we can all get back together. Neil Kegley, but he didn't tell me where he's from, so I guess we'll have to not do that part. Or he can send it in. We'll do it later. Really enjoying the podcast. I get my mojo from your podcast as well as the guys down under at On the Bench. I just finished listening to your episode about modeling space. My wife and I both model. That's like the third one.
Yeah, I know.
But we've moved into a smaller home, which presents some very interesting challenges. In our previous home, we had a full basement that allowed for plenty of room and options. Now, not so much. I recall one of you guys saying that you knew someone that was a traveling salesman that modeled out of a suitcase. Maybe down the line a bit, you guys could discuss the challenges of limited space modeling, how to deal with airbrushing, booth, etc., or maybe some suggestions. I love aircraft and armor, and while 72nd has always been a favorite, aging eyes may move me to 48th. Now, I'm going to say something about that. It's kind of the opposite problem when I was into model railroading. You think you can go down in a scale and fit more in. Well, it doesn't work that way. It just expands to fill whatever space you got, regardless of what scale you model in. So I think if I went from 35th scale armor to 16th scale, I think my projects would get more involved, and I would be trying to put even more ridiculous amounts of detail onto something. So,
well, I maintain that uh, if you look at open up a 72nd scale kit and open up a 48th scale kit, I guarantee you will find some parts in the 48th scale kit that are every bit as tiny as any part in the 72nd scale kit. There's just more of them because they've added more detail because they've got the ability to. So you end up modeling the same size pieces in many respects.
I think that's true as well. Well, he goes on to say he's been modeling since he was a teenager and he's approaching 56 this summer, although he's been on a hiatus for the past 10 years due to space issues. But he's getting his ducks in the row and getting his tools, paints, etc., and looking forward to getting back into it. Well, hopefully he figures out the space situation. You know, I don't know. I've been fortunate. I used to model in apartments a lot, and I'd have to airbrush out on the patio or the deck or whatever the apartment I happen to have. But that was before a spray booth. I wouldn't do that anymore. I don't think. You could always put the spray booth in a different part of the house that you had access to a window.
I've been really lucky, other than the few years in law school. Um, when I was in the dorms at the University of Louisville, I've always had a dedicated room to model in, and that's really been nice for me. Yeah.
And lastly, this one's interesting. This is from Jim Unger, who wrote to us before, and he's the one who mentioned that Salvino JR line of NASCAR kits that we talked about. I think I brought it up in the last episode.
Yeah.
Uh, Mike and Dave, to answer your question about licensing of the Salvino Junior kits. Now, I'll say again, these are all pre-90s classic American NASCARs, some of the more famous drivers. But anyway, the Salvino in their name is Rick Salvino, who is the son of Ralph Salvino. Ralph was the motorsport race director from the early 60s to the late 70s and worked for SDP. Well, that makes a lot of sense.
Probably makes things a bunch easier.
Yes, Rick also worked for STP and has many, many contacts in the NASCAR world. At this point, they have licenses with Petty, that's Richard Petty, the estate of Buddy Baker and Junior Johnson, and the family of Harry Ranier, and just signed with the Blue Max Racing with the son of Raymond Beadle, which got us the Rusty
Mm-hmm.
Wallace Pontiac 2x2 or 2+2.
Right.
They have almost all the monogram molds from the stock car line as they bought those from Atlantis after Atlantis purchased them from Revell in the fallout of Revell going under some years ago.
Yeah.
Salvino's plan is to use the molds from the monogram stock car line after cleaning them up, along with creating new bodies to go with existing chassis and interiors. The only thing that didn't come over were the molds for the glass and tires. They have had to produce new units and will be cranking them out. They use power slide decals, which are the best for us NASCAR builders. I've not heard of those,
No.
but he's used J&J in the past, along with Blue Ridge, Wetworks, Yesterdays from BSR out of Atlanta. Their plans are to have several Mopar kits from the late 60s and early 70s coming out during the year and this year and 2021. The JR is Jim Roberts, who is the designer of the kits and has been friends with Rick for over 30 years. He is broadcasting a live video chat on Facebook every Saturday morning at 9 a.m. Central Daylight Time. Check it out. Now, I've not checked that out yet, but that's interesting. This the guy making these kits who owns this company is sounds like his dad was pretty much a who's who in the NASCAR circuit, sounds like, and he's kind of carrying the torch now.
All right. Well, I'll take this moment to make my usual episode plea for anybody who's listening to take a moment when you finish the episode and go into whatever podcasting app you're using, and please give us 5 stars, give us a rating. Like I said, it's not an ego thing. What it does is it causes the algorithms in the programs to push our podcast up so that new people can stumble across it. And uh, Mike and I have been watching the stats for the last few months, and we're very pleased by the growth we've had, and we'd like to continue that growth. And we need your help to do it. So if you wouldn't mind, take a minute and give us 5-star rating on whatever podcasting app you're using. We'd appreciate it. So, Mike, you and I were just bemoaning the fact that neither one of us has gotten as much done the last couple of weeks as we've wanted to. But I assume you have done some modeling. I've seen some photographs on the Facebook feed. So, what have you been doing?
Well, my airbrushes are fixed. Well, I got a hose
Yay!
for one and got the other one fixed. So starting to move forward. Well, since I got the airbrush fixed, I've got the satin finish on the Zis 2 anti-tank gun. Haven't started any more weathering yet, but not before more repairs on that little guy, though.
Uh-oh.
Somehow it fell off the bookshelf of my workbench, which is about an 18-inch fall down to the work surface.
Oh.
And somehow only the lower gun shield and one of the wheel mounts broke off cleanly at the glue joints.
Nice.
Luckily, no photo etch or any of the other stinking detail work I'd done was damaged. I don't know how it fell off. I don't know if the skewer it was on was too tall, and it just tipped over, or might have had a little 13-year-old help by accident. Couldn't get a confession.
That's the best thing about having a dedicated room with a door that I can close and lock. Yeah, I don't have to worry about that.
Don't have to worry about that. Yeah, mine's semi-shared right now, so I don't know that that's what happened, but it could have. But it's all good. It's all fixed now. Um,
Good.
the other one I've been working on is the E16A1 Paul in this Fujimi aircraft catapult combo I'm working on.
Mm-hmm.
The catapult's kind of at a pause until I figure out how to cable it, and I'm still kind of working through that. But with the Paul, I've got the wings together and got the seams all worked out of the wing halves, and I've been working on the cockpit. What there is of it, there's not much in that kit, just seats and a
Right.
control stick.
A
That's
floor.
about it, and a floor. Yeah, so that's all
Yeah.
together and painted. And I kind of feel like I want to have the main span of the rear canopy open. The kit includes a full greenhouse, and it also has a second one that's got the rear section telescoped up into the forward part, where you can have the rear gunner radio operator position open. So I've kind of been scratching some structure inside the fuselage in there, and I made the stowed ammo drums for the machine gun, and then I've got to do. There's an instrument on the opposite side of the aircraft along the fuselage wall. I suspect it's another piece of radio equipment, and I've got to do a little work on it, and then I'll paint that and weather it. And if I like how it looks, I'll go with the open option. If not, I'll just close it all up. We won't have to worry about it.
Speaking of the canopy, does anyone make a canopy mask set for that aircraft?
Yeah, Montex makes one, so I
Oh,
need to pick
good.
that up.
Yes.
And then there was another. What is that Japanese aviation site you were talking about
Uh,
a few
which
episodes?
which one? J Aircraft or
No,
Arawasi?
Arawasi. That's it.
Yeah,
Um,
Arawasi block.
I was searching for something that kind of got me onto their page. They had a canopy mask from a company called
Dead Design
what was
Models.
Bad Guy,
Oh, bad guy. Okay.
which I think's defunct.
Yeah.
I don't. Anyway, they had a mask set that had both the full greenhouse and the retracted canopy masks for both.
Huh.
But I think most of it's the same anyway. There's just a couple that get
Right.
smaller when it's all telescoped together. So, um, I should probably be painting the fuselage interior this week, and maybe get the fuselage halves together. I don't have much more work to do it. I'll probably put some masking tape seat belts in it or on the rear seat or something. That'd be about it. Not trying to do too much on it. That's what I've been working on.
The funny thing about that I mentioned to you the other day is that I don't think I have ever seen the Paul built up in person. I mean, I've seen there's one or two builds online, but I don't think I've ever seen that kit at a contest anywhere built up, which is kind of surprising to me because it's been out since the late 80s, early 90s, and it's a beautiful airplane. Um, and it just kind of surprises me that I've never seen it. So I'll be really interested to see yours when it's done.
Well, you see a lot of Jake's, but Jake's a little bit bigger plane. It's longer. Jake's a 3-seater.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's not a lot out there on this aircraft. I don't think. Maybe that's it.
Yeah.
It was kind of short lived, but they didn't make many of them. They didn't get a lot of use,
Right. Yep.
so
That is true.
that's probably why. And you, what are you working on?
Well,
I know what you're going to blame me for now.
yeah, right. Yes, you do. Congratulations, you figured it out. Yeah, well, the MiG 17, I'm tired of talking about it. I'm sure that every listener is tired of hearing about it. Uh, it's painted, decaled, sludge washed. It's in the final weathering stages. I'll tell you what, I don't like weathering. I'm not very good at it, so I tend to rush through it, which in turn, of course, leads to the not very good at it. Um,
Took the words right out of my mouth.
a lot of the videos that I've been watching on YouTube lately, Night Shift and stuff like that, and those guys really put a lot of effort into weathering. So I'm trying to slow down a little bit and put a little more effort into it, see if I get a better result. Now, the aircraft itself in real life really wasn't that heavily weathered, so I'm not going to go crazy, but I'm trying to be a little more detailed about it. But that's almost done, and hopefully by next episode, I'll be able to tell everybody it's done, and you'll never hear about it again. Um, the Bibber, the little German submarine, is been completed. It's built. It's primed. It's firmly into the paint shop. I'm cleaning up a few little areas that needed clean up, and then it's going to get paint. So it moved off the bench, which left my construction left me without a kit under construction. So since I've sucked you into 72nd scale aircraft, I thought it was only fair that I step into your genre and build a 35th scale kit, armor kit. Well, I asked you for recommendations, and you recommended the Trumpeter M30 122 millimeter gun. And so I have just broken plastic on it. I've cut out just the first few parts and glued them together. And I've realized something, and I want to know if you experience it. Might not be the same with what you're going through building a 72nd scale aircraft, but I'm building this artillery gun, and I don't know what the parts are in real life. I'm not. I mean, I know what a barrel. I know what a barrel is, and I know what wheels are, and yeah, I can figure out some of the other stuff. But there's a lot that I don't know what it is, and so it leads to questions of should this scene be eliminated or should it actually be there on the real thing? Um, what's going to be hidden later that I don't have to worry about cleaning up, or it's just it is a wholly different experience and definitely takes me outside my comfort zone uh, when I'm building something and don't know what the parts are in real life and what they do and what they should look like. Now, obviously, I've gone online and looked at reference, and there's a lot of these things preserved around, so I can see a lot of them. But it is a little bit different. It's a little bit uncomfortable, and I'm blaming you for that.
Well, I get that, but uh, this airplane, now the catapult's another story, but it's mostly truss work and looks like a bridge basically.
Right,
But the aircraft doesn't have a lot of parts. This one doesn't anyway. Um,
right,
but the things that I'm finding challenging about it, or anticipating finding challenging about it, is that so much of the shape is important. It's an airplane,
right.
and what I mean by that is there's a lot of curves and thin edges that you could really screw up if you're not watching what you're doing sanding,
Yeah,
and would dramatically change the look of this thing.
yeah. That is
So
that is definitely something you've got to pay attention to. So
so that's where I'm at with this.
yeah. Well, the M30 is just barely started, so I'll post. We'll post some episode pictures to go along with this episode, and you can see just how early in it I am. The other thing I've noticed is with that M30, the trumpeter instructions are they're not bad, but the sequence and the way it flows on the page is a little bit different, and so you especially because I don't know what I'm doing basically with a lot of this as far as what I'm actually building, what these parts are. Uh, I'm finding that I have to pay a whole lot more detailed attention to the instructions, whereas with an aircraft, I know what wings and elevators and ailerons and canopies and gun sights and all that are, and you don't pay quite as much attention because you're used to it. It's familiar to you. But I've got to say, I recommend to everybody they step outside their genre and do something different. I anticipate this is going to be fun, and so you'll follow along with me. I hope.
Anything else?
Nope, that's it. That's what's on the bench and in the paint booth and in the weathering stage. And so I've got one or two other things pushed off to the side that I'll bring back in, I hope, along the way. But those are the main ones.
Well, then we'll move on to our favorites and biggest yawns in this last few weeks' announcements here. We didn't cover this last time, so it's time for that again. What
Yeah.
out there in the last few weeks has really caught your eye?
Well, one is, and I blame this one wholly on Jim Bates out in Seattle.
I thought it was going to be me.
Well, no, AJ, right. You can't take all the blame. Your shoulders aren't that big. Um, Velo Models, I think, has released a Bristol 170 freighter, and that's a funky looking 50s British two engine propeller driven transport where the whole front of the aircraft opens up as the cargo as the way to load and unload the cargo. Uh, the Canadians use these, and Jim sent me some photographs of uh, Canadian Sabres, basically F 86s, taken apart, and they use this Bristol 170 to transport them. And so there's some really great pictures of one of these Bristol 170s with a disassembled F 86 stuffed into it. And it would make a great, it would make a great build. And I'm trying to encourage Jim to do that because if he does it, then I don't have to. But it's a neat looking airplane, kind of, it's one of those things that's so ugly it's neat looking. So that kind of caught my eye. How about you?
Uh, my first one's from ICM, and this one's a little strange for me. It's a Royal Navy Armored Service Model T armored car from World War One. And the reason this one kind of caught my eye is it's small with a lot of flat surfaces on it, and
Mm-hmm.
it looked like a fabulous subject to start experimenting with some paint techniques again. Just the shape of the thing is it's a it's a Model T truck that they've just built an armored box. It's got an open bed that they've got a tripod mounted machine gun in the back of, and the driver's compartment's a little looks like an outhouse. It's just cabbed around the driver's seat essentially, but the sides and the hood and all it's all flat, just all flat angled surfaces, and I it's like I could try a lot of cool stuff on that. Now, I may pick it up if it's not terribly expensive. I see him, it probably won't be. So
Yeah.
I may grab that one. That looked interesting to me, just for the sake of trying some different painting on. It's small too, which would hopefully the build wouldn't be too drawn out, and you could get right to it.
Yeah.
Got any others?
Well, a comment on that one first. There is something about armored cars that I just love. Um, Everything from the early World War One stuff up to the World War Two stuff, all the way up to some of the stuff that the Russians operated back when it was the Soviet Union. Um, I just have a thing for that. I really like armored cars, so anything that like that always catches my eye. Um, the next thing that I've seen that I'm really interested in seeing in person is that the company FineMolds out of Japan has announced the release of an F4EJ, which is the Japanese version of the F4E, which the Japanese Air Force is just retiring now within the last year or so. And the pictures of the molds and the sprue shots and stuff like that, the kit's not been released yet, but a lot of the parts images have been teased, and God, that looks good. And we really haven't had a new F4 kit, maybe with the exception of Academy. I don't think we've had a new F4 kit in 20 years. So, all of the previous F4 kits have missed that generational change in molding technology that has happened. Um, and so I suspect this one is going to be hugely popular. And I can see why. I mean, even if you only wanted to build the Japanese versions and not anybody else's F4s, um, the Japanese have some very colorful F4s over the years, and they used them as aggressors. They painted them up in special markings. So I can see myself really, really wanting to dive into one of those. So, how about you?
There's a resin figure company out of Vietnam called Paracel Miniatures. I think that's how you say it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, they just came out with a small series of G.I.s, and they're really fabulous looking winter winter period. They've all got long coats on and scarves and that
World
kind of
War Two.
thing. Yes, World War II. I thought they're really neat. Now, I don't know if it's something I would end up with or not. I don't do a lot of Western Front subjects. That could change, I guess. But this company, well, some of their early stuff was all like post-apocalyptic zombie kind of stuff, but then they started doing a lot of Vietnam War, particularly they've got a bunch. They have several sets of Vietnamese civilians. They have a lot of North Vietnamese army from the war period, both infantry and tank crews and that sort of thing. They got some American figures as well from that period. So they've done a lot of unique things that have not really been touched on by a lot of the other companies. But these, in particular, uh, these these winter clothed GIs look really really nice. So I'm gonna have to get out and see if I can find a review of their figures, and I don't know, maybe I'll pick them up.
Hmm,
You got anything?
that'd
You
be
got
cool.
anything else?
Well, my yawn is Hasegawa. Hasegawa has an SU-35 kit. I love the SU-35. It's a great looking airplane. I'm into Russian and Soviet aircraft post World War II. So normally this would be in my wheelhouse, except the version they have released is the SU-35 UAV version, where basically it's an SU-35, and where there's a cockpit, they've just got a faired over fuselage insert. And this thing isn't real, at least as far as I know. Um, it's kind of another one of those what ifs. It looks cool because the SU-35 looks cool, but there's so much out there that we really could use that it's it's a yawn for me. It just is, and really it shouldn't be, simply because it's generally in my wheelhouse.
Now, didn't they do an A10 as well?
They did the same thing with an A10, yes,
That's what I thought. I couldn't
and
remember if
that
it's
that
Hasegawa or
that
not.
yeah, and that similarly caused me to yawn.
My yawn, you may have seen them. Vallejo's come out with this line of stencils, and I don't know. I'm not feeling it. I just don't see the usefulness for a large percentage of what these things are for. There's like wood grain and splatters and spills and things like that. That I'm sure someone would do something fabulous with these, but it won't be me probably. I would never approach the things they've stenciled with a stencil. I'm not sure. This is I think it's a miss. I, have you seen them?
Yes, I have, and I get the same feeling out of them. It's like, why would you use a stencil for that when there are several different techniques that already exist that really look good if you do them. So I agree with you. I'm not exactly sure. I think it may be looking for a shortcut where one doesn't exist.
Maybe, and there's a lot of those texture and mapping type stencils have come out lately. I've got the Ushi
Hmm.
van der Rosten set, but I think
Yeah,
AK just did one, and somebody else is doing one. I just seems like maybe stencils are a hot topic all of a sudden amongst all these competing paint and finish companies.
yeah. I do think there is a little bit of Me Tooism in all of this. That as soon as one company comes out with something, whether it's a good idea or a bad idea, everybody else has to jump on the bandwagon.
Yeah, that's kind of what I think too. Well, our special segment chosen for tonight, we were going to talk about airbrushing some.
I was a little disappointed in this subject because, there's almost nothing to talk about as far as airbrushing goes. So I was really worried that we wouldn't have anything to fill the time.
Well, I think you're being facetious there.
Yes. I think you could go on for hours on this subject and
I,
just barely
I
scratch the surface.
well, let's just start with the equipment. What are your airbrushes? What's your stable right now? What do you got in the stable?
I actually have four right now. And yes, that's a ridiculous number. You don't need four. Um, I have a Badger 150 uh, that frankly, if I was telling a new modeler who's just getting into modeling and just getting into airbrushing and telling them the one brush that they need to start learning with, it would be the Badger 150. The thing is a workhorse, it's a gravity feed so that you can use it to spray metallics, you can use it for any regular paint. Um, it is the workhorse. I've owned mine for 25 plus years, and it is just a freaking workhorse. Now, it may be not as delicate as some other brushes, but it's a great brush. Um, I own an Iwata uh, 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 Infinity, uh, and it's a very nice brush, very well engineered. I own a Badger Velocity uh, that is a fantastic gravity feed as opposed to the one Badger 150, which is a suction feed. The Badger Velocity is a gravity feed, and but it's really nice. I've for the price of the brush, I have been impressed at how good it is. And then finally, I just within the last year, I purchased a Harder and Steenbeck, the top of the line Harder and Steenbeck brush, and I haven't used it a lot. It's very well engineered. It's very delicate, and boy, when you get everything tuned in, you can do some stuff with that brush that is hard to accomplish with almost any other brush. Um, but I haven't gotten uh, enough experience with it yet to be fully informed on it. But I own four brushes. You don't need four brushes. I frankly think that if you're just starting out with airbrushing, a Badger 150 is a great way to start. And then as you get on, you need to pick up a gravity feed brush somewhere along the line if you're going to start doing more delicate fine work. Um, but I think that's all you really need. And so I've got four of them because you know it happens over the years. How about you?
Well, I too have a Badger 150, and up until very recently, that's the only thing I've used. I agree with you. For somebody starting out, I would probably start with that one. I'd give the single action the complete skip over. I wouldn't
Yep,
start
I
there.
don't. Yep, I
I
agree.
would I was I would start with a double action airbrush. Now, double action we mean there's two trigger motions. You depress the trigger to start the airflow, and you pull it backwards to open the paint channel. So whereas a single action airbrush, the trigger only starts the airflow, and you have to move the needle manually. But I used to use a Badger 200 for a while. That's what I started
Me
on.
too.
But once I got the 150, uh, never really touched those guys again. Uh, for the 150s, that's especially true in North America. I think I don't know. You get outside the United States, what the Badger distribution starts to look like. Because
I don't know either.
you
That's a great question.
and that's it's a very serviceable airbrush. It's not invincible, as I've proven, especially the last month or so. I've had to. Well, I had a part failure, and then in replacing it, I damaged something else, putting it back together, and had to wait another week for that to come in. But very easy to maintain, and I didn't utilize it, but as you know, because you've told me numerous times that for a small fee, you can send it in and have the thing completely overhauled.
Yeah, that is one of the great features of Badger airbrushes is for like 12 bucks you can mail them once a year. You can mail them your airbrushes, all of their Badger airbrushes that you own, and they will completely rehab them, clean them, to lubricate them, tune them back to factory specs, and mail them back to you. And when they come back to you, they are amazing. And I have done that nearly every year with that 150, and it just it takes a licking and keeps on ticking. It's a great airbrush. I love that feature.
Now I've got a second one now, thanks to you, because you used to have 5 airbrushes.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks for ratting me out.
And it's a what is it? It's a Skybow.
Skybow. It's an Iwata clone.
Yeah, it's an Eclipse, I think. Iwata
Right.
Eclipse.
Yeah.
And I got all my hoses are Badger hoses, which have the small 1/8-inch fitting on them. So I had to
Yeah.
get a hose adapter, and it just fit on the bottom of the airbrush, and then took my Badger hose after that. I played around with it the other day. I've not used it much yet. I'm going to break it out again on this E16 aircraft and try it out again. But it's a gravity feed, so that's the big difference for me. Is that the 150, the Badger 150 is a siphon feed, and I'm just used to that. So we'll have to see how it goes.
It's an Iwata clone, so it sprays just like any Iwata.
Now it's a little bigger in my hand than the Badger. It's gonna take a little getting used to, but it's not too bad. Have to give it a try. Now we've talked about CO2 and compressors before, right? We've
I was gonna say. So, Mike, talk about your air source.
my air source is a 20-pound CO2 tank with a dual gauge regulator on it. And
And what gas do you spray?
I use CO2, which is starting to get expensive. Believe it or not, I think.
That is weird.
Well, I think there's maybe an environmental fee on it at some point
Oh, okay.
at the gas place. Yeah, you get it filled up you make an initial investment in the tank, and then it's like trading propane tanks at the supermarket or wherever.
Right.
You just take it back and you're just swapping the tanks, and they're making sure they're tested and safe and all that. But the gosh, I think that fill was over $50 this time.
Was it really? Wow.
Yeah. Now, if I don't do something stupid like leave it all on, you know, that's $50 about every 18 months I'm spending. So it's not terrible, but yeah, I'm probably going to have to revisit the compressor again at some point here in the not so distant future.
Have you thought of using anhydrous air rather than CO2 and see if there's a huge price difference?
No, but uh, it did cross my mind to ask them about that next time, because that's like, gosh, maybe there's something else.
Yeah.
And it's a possibility. I don't know. I've never heard of anybody using that though.
I think there are a couple of club members who use that. And the big advantage of it, of course, is that there's no moisture to it. So you really don't, same thing with CO2, you don't have to really worry about moisture. And it may well be cheaper now that CO2 is moving up in price.
And you are using?
As everyone who's listened to the back episodes of this podcast knows, I am using a Silent Air SIL 20A. It's a silent compressor, and when I say silent, I mean silent. Um, the loudest sound that it makes is a little puff of air where it goes tss, when the compressor cuts off because the tank has been filled. Um, and then, other than that, when it kicks on, the hum is every bit as quiet as your compressor on your refrigerator. Probably even quieter, actually. You don't ever have to worry about, oh, my tank's low, or I left the darn thing open and lost all of my gas. The downside is it ain't cheap. They run about nowadays about $600. However, I can tell you from my previous one, it lasted me 27 years. So $600 stretched over 27 years, not a bad investment. And
No,
it's,
that's not bad. It's probably cheaper than my CO2 at this point.
yeah, really. And so, when my old one finally gave up the ghost, I had zero hesitation about going and getting another one. I mean, I didn't like to dig into the wallet like that, but it's just awesome, and you can get a nice steady flow. You don't have like a lot of little cheap compressors with no tank. You get air pulsing as the compressor generates pressure with a silent air with a tanked compressor. You don't have that problem. So you get a nice steady stream, and you can fine tune how much pressure you're pushing out based on what you're painting, what 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 paint mix, what paint type, all of that stuff. So I can't sing the praises of it high enough. I love it.
Now, for the safety side of this, we both have invested heavily on the spray booth side of things.
Yep.
Now, I'm using it's a sheet metal fabricated spray booth made by, they're out of business now, North Coast Hobbies.
Oh, okay.
Uh, they were the ones that used to advertise in the back of Fine Scale, and it's got a big squirrel cage blower on the back of it, and I vent it through an outside window, and it takes a standard furnace filter to kind of keep the heavy stuff up from accumulating on the fan. Uh, one thing I would recommend if people are piping their a spray booth out of their house or whatever, um, I've used straight sided 4-inch standard HVAC tube ducts. I see a lot of pictures folks have sent us, and I see them online where people are using like a corrugated dryer hose.
Static pressure problems.
Yeah, it's a big static pressure problem, and you're really limiting the ability of your fan to evacuate your spray booth using that kind of a hose on your spray booth.
Yep.
So if you have the room, uh, you can buy all the elbows and bends. A lot of those things are you can manipulate them. You can get any angle you want out of them. The
Right.
connections, and then the straight sections just form up from preformed sheets with a lock edge on them, and it's just
Yep.
really easy to put that stuff together and use some aluminum tape to seal it all
Seal it.
up, and you get a lot better flow using that. So what are you using?
Well, as a matter of fact, it's funny you mentioned that because I was going to bring that up. I'm using my air booth is called a Pace paint booth, a Pace PACE Peacekeeper paint booth. They come in three sizes, uh, two different 24-inch booths, and then a 36-inch booth. And the 36-inch booth now costs like $700. Pace is still in business. Their website's pacepaintbooth.com. Um, but back when I bought it is just when he started manufacturing these things. It's made out of sheet metal. It's got a squirrel cage motor. Um, and I think I picked mine up for $295 many, many, many years ago. And uh, the thing is fantastic. It's a great, well made, well done paint booth. It's the same thing. It uses standard air replaceable air filters. Um, Back where I've got a very short run here to vent my booth to the outside. But back when I lived at my previous house, I had a run of about 7.5 feet to get to the outside from where my paint booth was located. And I quickly discovered that you can't use the corrugated dryer venting, that you had to go with the 4 inch, round 4 inch straight sided uh, 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 tube, because if you didn't, the static pressure was such that you couldn't push the air out. It's amazing how quickly static pressure over a distance causes a problem. So, um, if you're venting your paint booth, my recommendation is exactly the same as yours, unless it's a very, very short run. I mean, of more than a foot or two. Uh, uh, I would definitely go with um, the slab-sided aluminum circular um, uh, vent tube.
Well, I was thinking at my old house, the 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 window well that I vented my air booth was over. It was over 12 feet from the air booth,
Wow.
and the motor on mine it went straight up into the floor joists and then straight across the basement and right out a basement window well, and it would push it as long as I had straight tube. It would push it all the
Yep.
way. So it worked out real nice. So yeah, that's a good thing to keep in mind.
Yep.
Well, that's the equipment. Now the what paints are you mostly using, and how are you thinning them?
Oh, so you want a subject that we can cover in just 30, 45 seconds. Okay. Um,
At a high
uh,
level.
yeah. Uh, this is probably every bit as much as, what your airbrush is and what your compressor is. What paint you use is a big deal. Um, I use enamels, mostly color coats is what I like. Um, and the nice thing about enamel paints is that they're idiot proof, and I'm an idiot. Uh, they are extremely forgiving. Mixing ratios don't have to be, you don't have to use an eyedropper to get just the right number of drops of each component. About 30% thinner, about 70% paint. Mix it up, heat it up a little bit, spray it. And that is another advantage of using enamels is you can heat them, and like on a coffee warmer, a coffee cup warmer. And it is amazing how it increases the flow and the finish of an enamel paint to be spraying something that's sitting at about 105 or 110 degrees. It just sprays so much better. Uh, and I like enamels. Unfortunately, enamels are kind of going away. And I mean, the color coats that I buy, you can't buy them direct anymore. And unfortunately, the U.S. distributor, doesn't always keep everything in stock. Um, I've been experimenting lately with AK's lacquer acrylics. They're acrylics that you can thin with lacquer paints, um, or lacquer thinner, unicorn tears. Uh, I really like it. Uh, I don't think it's quite as good as enamel, but it's pretty darn close. The mixing ratios are a little more sensitive, um, but it has a lot of the advantages of the enamels. And of course, now everybody's going to acrylics and lacquer acrylics. And so they're much easier to obtain, uh, as opposed to the enamels, which are kind of going away. So um, the third paint that I probably use sparingly, but I love, is the Mr. Color line. Uh, you can obtain uh, bottles off of eBay. Is probably about the best way to get them if your local hobby shop doesn't carry them. Uh, the line is not as diverse as I'd like, but boy, they spray well and they are durable. They're beautiful paint finishes, um, and I really like them. So those are probably my top three. Although I've run some experiments with Mission Models paints, and I like them when you get them tuned in, but working with them is a little bit like chemistry, and so it's much more sensitive than the other types of paints that I've used. So I'm still getting used to that. How about you?
Uh, I don't use a lot of enamels anymore, and I tell you, I really haven't in a long time. I started with Tamiya in the '80s, right when they became available in the United States. So I have, gosh, several decades of experience with that paint, and I typically, for the early part of that time, I was using their X20A, their alcohol based thinner.
Mm-hmm.
Crap, I used to thin it with like window cleaner. There's a times I was doing that, but um, it, the biggest game changer with Tamiya paint for me was when they started selling that yellow cap lacquer thinner
Yeah.
in the United States, and man, that really made it a lot better. Not that it was bad before, but it was a lot less forgiving with the alcohol based thinner than with the lacquer thinner. So just about all of my painting to date, up until like the last couple of years, has been with Tamiya paint. Now the problem with Tamiya paint is there's not that many colors in the line at all. They're getting better.
Yeah.
They've added.
Yes, they are.
I know for armor they've added 5 colors, I think, here recently. German colors, at least 5. There's three new shades for the German tritonal camouflage, and then they came out with 2 colors that were specific yellows used by the army in North Africa. But I've started using these real color paints from AK Interactive, and they're really really similar,
Yes, I agree.
and some of their colors are really great, and I think I'm gonna like those. On the Zis, I've used a little bit of their when they're Russian greens, and I think I'm gonna pick up a few more colors for the Bofors project I've got going that's kind of sitting static for a while. But um, even with that, I'm using the Tamiya lacquer thinner to thin that with,
Yeah. I use the
and
Mr. Color leveling thinner, the unicorn tiers, and same thing.
which is something I want to try. Uh, if no other reason, the bottle's so much bigger.
Yep.
The 400 milliliter bottle.
Yep. You can get them off Amazon.
Um, uh, I've also been experimenting with Mission Models paints, and I agree with you. But that's probably a topic for a different discussion. Those paints are really nice, and I'm starting to like them a lot more than I did when I first started using them. I had to get some help from Mr. Miller out at Model Paint Solutions to get me on the right track with those paints. But still kind of figuring it out now. I'm using Mission Models paints on the interior of the aircraft I'm working on. So
Mm.
we'll see how that goes. But with those, I'm pretty much using all the Mission Models products to thin and to paint those. But like you said, it's a little bit more of a chemistry kind of experiment for a new user, and
Right.
that's a whole different ball of wax. I don't have enough experience to talk about it too much yet. I guess that's really what I'm saying. But
Yeah.
Tamiya and the AK Interactive. Now I've not used any of the Mr. Color line, and I was thinking about for this aircraft to pick up a couple, but I already bought the gray and the green out of Tamiya's line. Now They make the propeller brown. Maybe I'll
Yeah.
get that one.
Well, I'll tell you what, the Tamiya line, the bane of my existence is trying to brush paint any of the Tamiya paints. They're awful for brush painting. Don't even try it. The I agree with you. If you thin them with either the Tamiya lacquer thinner or the Unicorn Tears, the Mr. Color leveling thinner, it sprays beautifully. And Tamiya has, especially if you're building Japanese aircraft, they've got pretty much all of the Japanese colors covered. I like them a lot. Like I said, the only reason I'm a little bit of a dinosaur, I still like the enamels because they are so forgiving as far as actually airbrushing them. Um, so I've kind of hesitated to move away. I suspect eventually I'm going to have to, simply because I do think that that enamels are going the way of the dinosaur, and eventually it's going to happen. So, but I'm going to hang on to the ones I've got as long as I can.
Well, I've got about 200 tins of Humbrol. A lot of its aircraft colors too.
Yeah. Well, if they've never been opened, they might still be good.
They're still good. They're pretty old. They're from their authentic line, which is they've not been
Uh,
branded that way in 20 some years. So
at least, at
at
least,
least. Well, we've talked about forgiveness of paint systems. I think with the Tamiya and the lacquer thinner that it's hard to beat. I usually shoot for about 50-50 when I'm thin, and I just eyeball it. I don't really have
yeah,
to think about it too much.
yeah. The only difference between an enamel and uh, Tamiya or AK thinned with lacquer thinner, the only difference I've noticed is that the enamel is still a little bit more durable, a little bit more amenable to sanding, a little bit more tough in regard to handling, but there's not much difference comparatively.
Well, the acrylics have come a long way.
They really have.
Anything else we need to talk about with airbrushing tonight?
Well, I mean, there's certainly 10,000 different things we could go into, gloss coats, flat coats, these weird wizards out on the internet who can brush paint and make it look as good as an airbrush finish. And there are some of those people out there, and I'm pretty sure they've sold their soul to the devil, because I don't see how some of these guys do it. I do think airbrushing will increase your satisfaction in your models, your own personal satisfaction in your models, because it does. I mean, it's in miniature doing what in general they did to the real prototype tank or airplane or whatever. And so for most of us mortals, I think it helps you achieve a better finish, a more realistic scale finish. Um, the only piece of advice I would give people about airbrushing is do it, and do it a lot. Um, Airbrushing is not like riding a bicycle. If you have not airbrushed in 6 months and then you go back to it, um, it's a skill that atrophies over time. And a lot of the great builders that you see out there, they're painting all the time, they're airbrushing all the time, and so you get super comfortable with it. Um, the only other piece of advice I've got regarding airbrushing is that, and this is almost folklore advice, and that is there are some nights where it just isn't working, that you can't get the airbrush to spray, you can't get the paint thinned just right. It just, you're loading up your airbrush, you're starting to run some paint on your test area before you paint your model, and you just can't get it right. There's no good reason for it. It's just happening. It's not your night. That case, walk away. Clean the airbrush out, shut it down, and walk away. Because if, like they said, if you push a bad position, you'll end up screwing something up. And I don't know why that is, but there are just some nights that it's like that.
Not just airbrushing. Could
I
be a lot
agree
of
with
things, but yeah, I have a walk away night. Luckily, not that often, but I agree. It's better to stop than get frustrated and do something stupid.
Like they say in Top Gun, don't push a bad position. Select zone 5 and escape. So, anything else, Mike, or do you want to go to your shout out?
I guess it's time for shout outs. We're about an hour and 15 into this, so
Yeah, wow.
time flies.
So, who do you want to shout out?
I'm shouting out Mr. Groves, Mr. Inchai, Jeff.
Good guy.
Yes, he is. If you remember last episode, I asked for some information, then you doubled down and told whoever's listening to send me all the information they could on Japanese catapults, etc. Well, Jeff boxed up some of his Imperial Japanese Navy books and just mailed them to me. Probably had your help.
He did that. Yeah, he'll do that. He's a good guy.
Which was very generous, and I'll get those back, Jeff, as soon as I can. He had already Post-it noted the catapult pages, which was nice. Then there's a couple in there that had some pretty good information, but they're not quite the same type that's in this Fujimi kit. But definitely look like one of the Hasegawa catapults, so I'll keep that in mind. I'll make sure I copy all that stuff. In addition, he sent me a book, one of those Kagero from Poland, those 3D super scale, super drawing series books on the heavy cruiser Tone.
Mm-hmm.
And it's got some really cool CAD renderings in it, and not so much of the catapult, but it's got the positions for all the 25 millimeter anti-aircraft guns. And that pit road kit of the triple mount 25 is on my short list of things to buy. As soon as I can find a deal or have enough stuff to order it from Hobby Link Japan, I'm going to pick that gun up. And there's somebody who makes an aftermarket set to fix a couple of things. But for a way to display the gun, there's some really cool. I call it a parapet. It's a raised circular platform, with a lot of girders and truss around it, and some mesh around the parapet to keep you from falling out in the heat of things. But there's a couple I've picked out that look like a really good, not too difficult scratch project as a way to actually display that model, which I think would be really cool. He also sent me another book I'll mention. It's another heavy cruiser, the Takeo.
Yeah.
It's from the Anatomy of the Ship series, which is nothing but, page after page of line drawings.
Yeah.
They've got the full elevations, and they've got the deck looking straight down, but then they break out all the cross sections, and then all the fittings, all the weapons fitments and everything are parsed out into individual pages and sections of this book. And in it are line drawings for all the armaments. And back to this pit road kit, there's line drawings for the single 25 millimeter, the double, and then the triple barrel versions of that gun. And in addition, there's 4 views of the watertight on deck ammo lockers that are positioned all around those guns, all over the ship. Basically what I'm getting at is I've got everything I need to build that gun the way I would want to do it. And thanks to Jeff for sending me these books, because it's kind of got me excited about that project. In addition to the catapults.
5 years from now, I'm going to be laughing my butt off when Jeff Groves gets you to build a 72nd scale scratch built Japanese seaplane tender.
There you go.
He'll get you, man.
Well, who are you shouting out?
Well, I want to shout out first and foremost IPMS USA, the national organization of the International Plastic Modeler Society, United States branch. Now, I will disclose I'm the recruitment and retention secretary for the national organization. So my opinion here is not unbiased. But in addition to joining your local club, if you join IPMS USA, the national organization, you'll meet a lot of great modelers. You'll have more resources for interacting with other modelers. It's a great organization and it's worthy of your support. So if you haven't looked into it, go to ipmsusa.org and take a look around, and I'd encourage you to join. So, what's your other shout out, Mike? You got one?
No, just Jeff. I think
Okay.
he
Well,
gets
I've
it
got
all.
one. Okay. Well, he did you a solid.
He did.
I've got one more, and that is Hussar up in Canada. Um, Hussar makes a lot of resin products, mostly for armor. And one of the things they make is the one of the downfalls of the Trumpeter M30 kit is it comes with those stupid rubber wheels. I do not know why any manufacturer still does that, but they do. Well, Hussar makes resin replacement wheels both for the gun and for the limber. Um, and I interacted with the owner over email, was able to confirm the stock, confirm that they were able to ship into the U.S. despite the coronavirus, and place an order. And um, a very smooth transaction, very good to deal with. And now I'm just going to wait, hope that Canada Post doesn't lose them and the USPS gets them to me. And it's not like I'm going to need them anytime in the next couple of days because I'm still far away from that point. But I want to shout out good customer service, nice website, Hussar Productions.
Straight from Hussar.
Yes, straight from Hussar. Yeah, they've got a website.
That's good to know.
I think that's about everything, Mike.
Until next time, Dave. There's so many kits
and so little time, Mike. You take care.
All right. See you next time.
See you.